everybody, my name is Alex, you're watching Izzy's Autos. Today we've got my 2007 Nissan 350Z or Z, depending on what part of the world you are. We're going to be going through the entire vehicle and giving you a review or a guide, if you want to put it that way, on what to expect with Nissan 350Zs. So stick around for this whole video. It's going to be very informational and hopefully it's going to help you out if you're deciding on buying a 350 as your next car. So the Nissan 350Z that I've got is the HR. So the HR was produced from 2007 to 2008. The difference with the HR is that you're going to be getting still the same 3.5 liter V6 engine. However, it's been tuned a little bit differently. It's got a little bit more power, a little bit more torque, but the truth is this engine differs significantly from the DE. I've actually had an Infiniti G35 before with the DE engine, and quite frankly it wasn't the same car at all. This feels very similar to a 370Z. In fact, if you were to drive these cars blindfolded, you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. One of the easiest ways to indicate whether it's an HR or the 2007 and up is by the hood scoop. The hood scoop is unique to the HR motor. That's because the motor actually did sit a little bit higher in the engine bay, so they had to make a little bit more space. All right, so another way of knowing the difference between the HR and the DE is by the tachometer. The tachometer on the HRs goes to 9,000 RPMs. Now, of course, it doesn't really reach there, but they do top out at about 76 to 7,700 RPM. Cool thing with this is you can actually set it on one of those gauges wherever you want your little red line button to start flashing. So if you want it at 7,500, hell, if you want it at 5,000, you can actually manually set that on that little button right there. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. This is one of the most common things you'll hear about the Nissan 350Z engines, or the VQs as they're called, is oil consumption. Now here's the thing. I've had two vehicles that did have the VQ engine, one the DE and one the HR, and there was a little bit of a difference. The DE did go through a little bit more oil, but this HR barely goes through any oil. I'll give you an example. This last season I went through its entirety of the oil change schedule, and it only burned just over a quarter of the oil that was in there. So I had well over half, and I did not even top it up once. Maybe I got lucky with the VQ motor that's in mine, but I have no complaints about oil. So if there's something you want to look out for, it's going to be sensors with the VQ engine. For example, on my old Infiniti that I had to replace every single crankshaft and cam position sensor at least twice. Given that this only has 89,000 kilometers on the engine, the sensors so far haven't been giving me any issues. But the one thing that typically goes wrong with these Nissans, if it's going to be anything, it's going to be electronic or sensor related. Something you might want to consider replacing as well and getting an aftermarket part would be for the oil coolers, especially if you're going to be driving your Nissan pretty hard. These do tend to heat up quite a bit, and that can rob performance and even potentially give you some more mechanical issues down the road. Oil coolers would come a very long way. They're about $500, $600. Can be a little bit more too, depending on your currency. It is a little bit pricey, but it might be worth it if you're going to be banging on your Nissan. The next thing you're going to notice is space. This is an extremely crammed engine bay, making any kind of modifications or repairs that much more painful. If you want to, for example, install new headers, you probably might have to drop the engine for that, just because there's really no space to get inside. Cats, same thing. When I had my cats replaced, we had to get a socket that was about this long just to reach from the transmission tunnel all the way over here to get to the bolts. So when it comes to engine space and maneuverability, it's not really the best. It can get a little bit clustered in here, so do consider that if you're a backyard mechanic or someone who isn't really too familiar with working on cars. Next is going to be transmission. The transmission that you desperately want, of course, is going to be paired with the HR350. And unfortunately, the HR350s do go for quite a bit more than the other DEs. Sometimes we're talking $5,000 and even north of that, $1,000 more just to get the HR. But the one thing that this car also came with that was extremely desirable was its transmission. The CD009. This is a 6-speed transmission, however, it feels fantastic. The throws are really direct, you know exactly where they're going. It's nice and notchy and it feels strong. However, what made this transmission the best was its durability and its strength. But a word of caution, the DE transmissions, or the transmissions that were paired with all the other engines other than the HRs, weren't the best. They weren't as direct as the HR or the CD009 transmission, and they also had synchro issues. My Infiniti G35, for example, had a third gear synchro issue. So whenever I would throw it into third gear quickly, let's say, it would actually grind. And sometimes, in some cases, even pop out of place. So make sure that the transmission that you are going to be testing on that car is working in good condition. If you feel any grinding, get the hell out of there. Moving on, it's going to be clutch. Now, the clutch on this car takes a lot of getting used to. I can't speak for some of the older generation 350s or the older 350s, but it's got kind of a vague clutch. It has an okay weight to it, but the bite point kind of feels like it's at the very end on a Monday and then at the very deep end on a Friday, and then Wednesday is confused. So it can be kind of a bit of a pain in the butt. That will take some getting used to, and if you've got a loud Tomei like I do, you're going to look like a complete douchebag if you don't know how to work it. Now, since we're on the topic of the clutch, the one thing you will notice with the 350, and if you're not really aware of it, you might even think there's something completely wrong with it, is the release bearing or the throw-out bearing, depending on how you say it. I really don't care. You're going to have a really loud whirring sound when your car isn't in gear. When the moment you put the clutch down, it disappears. That's the throw-out bearing. Don't worry about it. Pretty much every single Nissan 350Z has that issue, and I think even some of the G35s will suffer from the same problem with the release bearing. So let's move on to a couple more sensor issues. The rear sensors, I think they're called speed sensors, on 350s can go bad. Mine are completely pooched. So that means my traction control, my VDC, as it's called here with Nissan, is on, ABS light is on, and also my handbrake light is on as well. The sensors just get completely screwed on these Nissans. It's just one of the biggest pains that you're going to find with owning a 350 or a G35 at that. So just do bear that in mind. So here's a random pain in the butt. You're probably looking for a hood release button. You don't find it anywhere here, but it's actually located right underneath here. If you don't look for it, you'll never be able to find it. However, when you click it, this release mechanism sometimes gets stuck. So when you go and open it, it doesn't open completely. You have to pop it up again and then raise it for the second time. Now, while we're on that topic, the hood struts are going to go for sure. I think hood struts are about 40 some bucks each. You don't want to lose your fingers or your hands when you're taking anything out of it. So do bear that in mind. And then of course there's lack of space. This trunk is very, very shallow. I've got my camera bag here, I've got my other bag here, and then the tripod case, and look at how much space that takes. Apparently you can fit some golf clubs in here. I did it on my Infiniti, believe it or not, so it is possible, but this brace really does rob a lot of space. If you need anything high, well, actually, you're not going to be able to put anything in there because of the lack of room you find under here. So yeah, when it comes to space, not the best. So one of the worst parts about the Nissan 350Z, in my opinion, is the sound system. It is extremely, extremely subpar. Even though the GTs come with Bose, they're terrible. They have very low bass. The treble is brutal. You have no crisp sound, so you're probably going to have to upgrade your sound system when you get your 350Z, even if you have the Bose sound system in it. So here's going to be another spot of weakness for the 350s. That is build quality. It's really not the best. There are lots of plastic pieces that get all scratched and scraped up, and chances are you're going to have to refinish them just like these have been done. But if we move over here, here's a prime example of plastic that's gone bad. It scratches extremely easy, and then it looks very, very tacky and terrible on the inside of the car. Okay, so believe it or not, one of the things I do really like though about this interior is its design. It's very unique, and there aren't too many cars that are structured the way they are. The vents, everything that is driver-centric is perfectly suited for the driving position of the car. If that made any sense, it probably didn't. But let me just reiterate that. Everything is perfectly laid out for the driver. From the heating of the vents on your hands right here, to the shift knob, everything just feels super, super nice. And of course, the driving position of this car is excellent. You're sitting quite low down. Of course, you can adjust all these things, but the way that you're sitting in the car is very linear. It feels very sports car-like, the way it should be, but given the way that the window kind of swoops over you and the A-pillars and the B-pillars, it does give you some good visibility. But overall, the gauges are extremely well laid out, very nice, very clear, very easy to read. You've got your oil pressure gauge, you've got your voltage for your battery there, and then of course your other digital gauge, which can program various different things like speed, instant fuel economy, etc. Okay, so here's a weird one. Doors. These doors are really heavy, and they're quite long, as are most coupes. But that can make getting in your car a pain in the butt. These are cool handles, whether you like them or not, irrelevant. I think they're really cool, but they swing extremely wide open. But the thing is, if you're not careful, they'll just shut right on you. So you can expect lots of bruises on your legs if you do get a 350. And while we're on the topic of doors, here's another maintenance issue that you will find, unfortunately, on your 350Z. That is your window motors. Your window motors will eventually get weak and stop working completely. And let me tell you, they're a pain in a donkey's rear end to replace, and they're not that cheap either. Now, obviously, given the fact that the Nissan 350Z is a tuner car, that makes mods plentiful in the industry. From front lips to body kits to LED lights, you name it, you've got a little bit of everything here for the 350. I've got a diffuser on mine, I've got a front lip, I've got LED replacements for the reflectors on the front bumper, eyelids, side skirts, the list goes on. And of course, Tomei. All right, so we're gonna take it out for a little bit of a spin just to give you a little bit of a better idea of the sounds and everything. When you drive the 350, you're gonna notice that it does feel very go-kart-like. Now, my car does have a couple modifications to the suspension. It's got Tein lowering springs, and it's got SPL rear camber arms, but also this steering wheel makes such a difference on the car. The smallest inputs can result in your car just darting left and right. So it's funny how such a small little modification like this can make such a big difference on the way the car behaves and handles. But the thing with the 350, and this is the one thing that I absolutely adore with it, is just how quick the car feels. When you look at it, it's actually not the lightest car in the world, but it just feels like it's alive. Because it's naturally aspirated, you've got tons of torque, you've got tons of power really for the city and for most driving anyways. But when you get past that 4,000 RPM range, the car really does come alive. And then not to mention, there's also the sounds that it makes too. But right now I'm averaging 12.5 liters per 100 kilometers, and that's a mixture of city driving, a mixture of highway driving, and a couple pulls here and there too. So fuel economy isn't going to be the best. The most I've ever got on a tank on this car is about 500 kilometers. That's with a little bit more highway driving than city, so don't expect to have a very fuel efficient vehicle. All right, so let's do a little bit of a pull for you guys. Again, it's not the fastest car, but it's the sensation that this vehicle gives you, which I absolutely adore. It really does put you back into your seat. Don't get it mistaken, it's not a weak car, but I will say this. I strongly, strongly recommend you spending the little bit extra money and getting yourself an HR. So again, the HRs are the 2007s and up. They're just that much better. They give you that much more power, and it makes a difference, trust me. That 7,500 RPM red line comes such a long way. While they're shifting, you're hanging on to that gear, and you're just gonna continue pulling away quicker and quicker and quicker. So do bear that in mind. Yeah, but that's one of the best parts about this car for sure. All right guys, so that's all for me today. Hopefully this was helpful and I gave you a little bit of an idea of what to expect with the 350Zs. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore this car. It's probably my favorite car I've ever owned up to now. It does have its quirks, as Doug DeMiro would say, but it also has some awesome things that you can expect to get along the route. So if you like this video, leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and if I missed anything, leave them in the comments below and let's discuss them. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.